Back in the 80s, when I was going to university, I took a job with a local security company to earn some extra money during breaks and holidays. During the week-long break between the winter and spring semesters, I was assigned to be part of a team guarding the grounds of a former mental asylum located in the south end of the city. It was a huge lot covering several acres, destined to become a new subdivision. But at the moment, it was home to a number of crumbling buildings, and our job was to keep the bums and the partiers out. I went on duty at 1600 hours, i.e. 4 p.m. It was broad daylight, but the darkness took control by 8 o'clock. It was still only April. There were 3 of us on shift, one who stayed on station in the main hospital building, a second guard who walked the darkened corridors of said building, and a third guard who patrolled the dark and sprawling grounds, which included the annex. The annex. The annex was apparently where they put the hardcore inmates, patients. It was a low, dark, red brick building off to itself on the east side of the lot. Most of the doors and windows had disappeared, so it was easy to gain access to the interior of the crumbling ruin, and we had to be especially vigilant to keep out any potential intruders. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated it because it was dark and lonely, and because you were all alone. Sure, you had radio contact with the other guys, but we tried to keep transmissions down to a bare minimum. They were listening at dispatch downtown, and they weren't shy about questioning radio messages if they thought there was anything suspicious about them. Suspicious, like we were slacking off. We also tried to keep our visits to the annex down to the bare minimum, but we still had to enter the place at least twice per shift. On this particular night, something felt off. For one thing, the night was overcast, so dusk came early, and the darkness inside the empty corridors was complete and intense. Sure, you had a flashlight, but its light tended to make flickering shadows, warning shadows, which could be quite unsettling. At least you could smoke in the annex. Smoke to calm your nerves. They didn't allow smoking in the main building. So it was either smoke or go whistling in the dark. So, with a sigh, I lit up and stepped through the black opening where a door used to be. As I said earlier, something felt off, and so I moved forward slowly, until I was suddenly overcome by the chills. I don't mean I felt cold. It was like I had walked into a solid wall of frigid air. It was so cold, I actually backed up and went outside. It was still only spring, so I was wearing my security jacket, which I buttoned up tight. But I didn't fancy going back inside the annex. But I had to. Back in the 80s, security guards carried clocks. That's right, clocks. And when they visited an area they were supposed to check, they would stop at a key station and take the key and insert it into the clock, showing the time the guard visited that particular station. There were 3 stations in there, so I had to go back. I couldn't tell them I was unable to complete my rounds because I was cold, could I? Halfway along the south side of the building, there was an opening where a window had been, so I climbed up and entered. I was in a former storage room. Gingerly, I opened the door and stepped out into the hall. Thankfully, I could no longer feel the chill. I headed for the first key station, which was at the other end of the corridor, but I hadn't gone very far when I heard something skittering across the floor, as if someone had thrown a small rock. "Hello? Hello? Is there anyone there?" I called out, shining my light down and around the hall. Nothing. "Maybe I kicked something," I said to myself. "Heavens knows there's enough crap on the floor." I reached the key station at the other end of the corridor without further incident. But I couldn't help feeling someone was either watching or following me. It may have been due to the nature of the annex. This was home to all the violent offenders, patients, including more than a few murderers. There were also rumors that some patients had been tortured by sadistic guards, although many of the standard psychiatric treatments from a century ago would be considered torture today. Still, this was a sad place, sad and creepy. The next key station was located in a large room which had apparently been a lunchroom. As I approached the nearest entrance, the door slammed shut, right in my face. Worse yet, I could see the door handle moving quickly up and down, as if someone or something on the other side was trying to lock the door or throw it wide open. "Who's there?" I yelled. But I was so frightened, my voice rose to a falsetto, which made me so mad I charged the door and struck it with all my force, and was precipitated into the room, nearly falling flat on my face. I shone my flashlight all around the room, but there was no one there. Nothing but the dancing shadows caused by my flashlight. Behind me, the door I just came through slammed shut. I was back out in the hall within seconds, but it was deserted, empty. Yet still I felt a presence, like there was someone or something in the shadows, watching me intently. This was more than kids just messing around. I reached down and grabbed my radio. It was time to call for some backup. But my radio was dead. Dead? How was that possible? It had been working perfectly earlier in the evening. But then I realized I hadn't been hearing the usual static and transmission sounds for... what? Half an hour? An hour? It was radio silence. I was on my own. I was ready to take off then and head back to the guard station at the main building. I had an excuse, as my radio had failed, though I couldn't understand why it had failed. I checked the batteries before going out on patrol, and the radio was working fine then. Still, I think I would have stayed if it hadn't been for the music. It was the sound of a music box, an old-fashioned music box, and I recognized the tune. "Mom?" I whispered. "Mom?" My late mother had owned such a music box, one that played the exact same tune, and now I was hearing it being played in the dark halls of a mental asylum for violent inmates. I could hear the music, but it sounded strange, I mean, the music from a music box is tinny, but this was even more so, as if it was a recording of a music box playing, but not the actual music box itself playing. It just didn't sound right. I had had enough and had made up my mind to get the hell out of Dodge, when I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. I shone my flashlight down the hall and heard a loud, angry voice yell, "Get that friggin' light out of my eyes!" It was Earl, one of the other guards, a bald, middle-aged man with glasses and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. "How come you don't answer the bloody radio?" he boomed in his loud voice. "We've been trying to get a hold of you for the past half hour without alerting the office and getting a supervisor down on our necks." "My radio's dead." "Well, didn't you check the batteries?" "I did," I said, but I was sure Earl wouldn't believe me, if he was even listening. "Well, are you done in here then?" "I still have to do the cells." The cells was the dark corridor where they had put all the rubber rooms, where they held the violently insane. And it was also extremely creepy. "Well then, get cracking then." I hesitated, then finally said, "Would you come with me?" Earl snorted, but all he said was, "Let's go." I thought of telling Earl about the music, but I knew he would only scoff and think me a total wimp. And so we walked together in total silence and entered the darkened hallway. It was cold in there, frigid, but then it was always cold in there. Extremely dark too, so we both shone our flashlights to see where we were going. The key station was at the other end of the benighted hall. We were halfway down when the music came again. The music box music came again. "What the hell is that?" Earl exploded. "It's a music box," I said, trying not to laugh, even though I was scared spitless. "But where the hell's it coming from?" I just shrugged, although Earl couldn't see it in the dark. Earl continued, "And what's that?" A veil of mist had sprung up at the far end of the corridor where the key station was, a white glowing mist which seemed to expand and then coalesce into the form of a woman with a mop of unkempt black hair, a woman clad in a white straitjacket. She moved slowly towards us, but floating rather than walking. Earl bellowed some obscenity, dropped his cigarette, and took off running, and I wasn't far behind him. We were about halfway to the main building when Earl stopped, bent over and gasping for breath. When he was finally able to speak, he croaked, "Is she gone?" The night was dark, but I couldn't see any sign of the madwoman, although I was sure I could hear the faint tinkle of a music box. Earl finally lit another cigarette and even gave me one. "Don't say anything about this to anyone, eh?" I wasn't planning to. For the rest of the week, we rushed in and out of the annex, keyed the stations and split. Or if there was a new guy on duty, we got him to do it. We weren't worried about anyone hiding out in the annex. Not with that there. But nothing happened the rest of the week, and I never worked there again. And so that's how my story ends. Inconclusive, I know, but that's what happened. But lately I found my mom's old music box when I was cleaning out stuff. And I'm almost afraid to open it and play it. Afraid of summoning a ghost or an evil spirit or something. Silly. I know. Well, here goes. Oh my God! No! No! The moral of the story: old music boxes can often play haunting tunes. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,022 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music is the haunting and creepy Come Play With Me by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.